We share these streets. True tales of everyday folk in bygone Nottingham. Episode 4, George and Rose. There's more than one pub that claims to be the oldest in Nottingham, and it's hard to validate the facts and find a definite winner. The trip to Jerusalem is so named as knights reportedly paused there on their way to the Crusades. The word trip in medieval times referred to a stop-off on a journey rather than the journey itself. Where these knights were from and where exactly they were headed is unknown. I'm unfamiliar with international travel in the medieval period, and I'm unsure which British settlement at the time offered the best connection to the Holy Land. I like to imagine that perhaps the knights were just from Lenton and had seriously miscalculated that the trip was probably about halfway on the journey to Jerusalem. The signage on the trip dates it from 1189. The Salutation Inn is another claiming the title of Nottingham's oldest. Its name refers to the phrase Ave Maria or Hail Mary, the famous greeting uttered by the angel Gabriel to the Virgin Mary before announcing God's plans for her. The original alehouse reportedly dates from 1240 when it was known as The Archangel Gabriel Salutes the Virgin Mary, a catchy pub name if ever I heard one. The third serious contender is probably the best known, if only because it's right at the heart of the city centre. The Bell Inn is at the opposite end of the market square to the council house. Like the Sal, the Bell's name is religious in origin. It refers to an Angelus bell that was rung as a call to prayer in the 13th and 14th centuries. There was reportedly an order of monks, the White Friars, based somewhere around modern Friar Lane or Beastmarket Hill. A refectory for the monks was constructed and the Angelus bell placed above it, possibly to remind monks of prayer time in case they'd become too distracted by the refreshments on offer. In the mid-1500s, monasteries were dissolved by Henry VIII, but the refectory remained as an alehouse named in honour of the old Angelus bell. A Channel 4 history show in 1998 investigated the claims of each of the three pubs. Airing on the 5th of December 1998, it concluded that the Sal was the oldest building, but the Bell had been in longest use as a pub. Whatever the truth about the age of Nottingham's pubs, we can say for certain that in bygone days they were central to people's social lives. Irrespective of which is the oldest, when you lean on the bar at one of the many established Nottingham pubs, you're standing where countless people have over the decades. If ever you go to the Bell, you might be standing exactly where George or Rose did in the 1940s. In the last podcast we discussed a very sad episode during the World War II blackouts in Nottingham. This time we're on a more positive trip. People often say that those on the home front during the war showed a blitz mentality. What this means is a very deliberate carrying on, going about life as normally as possible. Under the circumstances, this needed resilience, determination and strength. In Nottingham, carrying on as normal meant continuing to go to the cinema, to drink and to socialise. In 1943, Rose, a 24-year-old living on Catherine Street on the Bulwell Hall estate, went with her Aunt Elsie to the Odeon Ritz cinema on Angel Row in town. We don't know what movie they watched, but adverts from the day suggest it could have been Henry Swings It, Forever and a Day, or Five Graves to Cairo, which, according to an advert in the Evening Post, starred Erich von Stroheim, the man you will love to hate. It may have even been Striptease Lady, starring Barbara Stanwyck, but I imagine that may have been aimed at the more discerning male cinema-goer. After the Odeon Ritz, Aunt Elsie proposed a quick drink in the Bell before taking the trolleybus home. Rose was reluctant. She believed that drinking and smoking were unpleasant, and was uncomfortable with the idea of going into a pub without a male friend or relative accompanying them. Aunt Elsie, however, proved persuasive, and slightly apprehensively Rose followed her into the narrow doorway of the pub. The Bell consists of a number of different rooms of varying shapes and sizes, and if it's busy you don't always have a choice of who your neighbours are. Rose and Elsie ended up in a bar surrounded by soldiers of the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, most of whom were speaking with Scottish accents. The Scots explained they were on a night out from Old Dalby, an army base in Leicestershire where military vehicles were built, maintained and repaired. One of the men was an Aberdonian named George, and he took an instant shine to Rose. When the time came for the women to leave, George asked Rose if she'd meet up with him the next time he had a night off. Tentatively, she agreed. When the big night arrived, though, Rose was too nervous and had changed her mind. Elsie insisted she went, saying,
"You are not going to let that poor lad down. He'll be off fighting for his country soon. You have to go."
Aunt Elsie's persuasion worked again, and Rose did go. Like countless people before and since, she met George at the Left Lion, and they went from there. The date went well. They grew closer over time and became an item, meeting up whenever they could. They married in May 1944 at Bulwell Parish Church. Their honeymoon was the very height of wartime luxury, a bike ride to Gunthorpe. A short while later, George was embarked to India. Rose stayed with her elder sister and brother-in-law while he was away, perhaps on account of her condition. George and Rose had recently discovered they were expecting their first child. Whilst in India, George sent a postcard to Rose's older sister and brother-in-law.
Well, here I am in the land of sunshine with a vengeance. The last time I saw rain was when I left the blighty shores. It's not too bad out here, but I won't like it anywhere away from my Rose. I had 3 nights on the run playing football last week. After the month on the boat, it was a bit too much. Can hardly walk. Stiff all over. But it was good fun. The natives here play barefoot. Very fast they are too. Thank you for helping Rosie in her loneliness. Hope she doesn't worry herself too much. I've been kicked around a bit, but I'm more than capable of looking after myself. And do it for her sake, and the apple of my eye that will be arriving shortly. We're not bad off for things, in fact better off as far as some go. I'll finish off now. Your loving brother, George.
The couple's daughter Barbara was born in March 1945. Rose and Barbara moved up to Aberdeen and lived with George's parents. Prior to this, the longest journey Rose had been on was to Skegness. George returned from India the following year, and their D-Mob baby, Stuart, was born early in 1948. Around 8 years later, they all moved back to Nottingham and lived at 3 Levers Avenue in Arnold. Rose and George are now buried together at Red Hill Cemetery. The descendants now live in Arnold, Woodthorpe, Mapley Park and West Yorkshire. In modern Nottingham, pubs are disappearing. Not the buildings necessarily, but the traditional watering holes where you go to drown your sorrows, relax after a busy week, or take part in the social lottery of who you might meet there. Times move on, of course, and pubs are changing because society is making them change. Many old pubs are now restaurants or just sitting empty while their forecourts are used as a car hand wash. Or is it a hand car wash? I can never remember. Pubs were special because they lasted beyond generations, so the place where you met that charmer last night could be where your gran met your granddad several decades ago. Where you sat and slated your manager after work yesterday is where someone sat several decades ago and badmouthed their foreman from the rally or players factory. Nowadays, pubs tend to have refurbishments to make them look old, whilst the authentic fixtures and fittings are chucked in a skip outside. I've known a few people take on pubs as businesses, but have been told that the big breweries tend to tie landlords into extortionate supply contracts that are simply unsustainable. It's inevitable that pubs are disappearing from our lives, so I'd urge everyone to photograph their local and post a picture online. Tweet it or stick it on Facebook or Instagram and see what local old memories come back in the replies. For the descendants of Rose and George, their very existence is thanks to that spontaneous trip to the Bell and the persuasiveness of Aunt Elsie.